Introduction. Descartes is correct that the essential self as a thinking entity is central to one's consciousness, unlike the self as a material entity. The core argument. Descartes' concept of self revolves around the idea of the dualism of mind and body. In other words, the body and its physical attributes are separate from the unseen mind or soul. These two entities are distinct substances, and the mind has a prevalence over the body. One's essential self is their thinking entity rather than a material one. In his Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes used wax as an example of defining the self. Namely, he explained that one could perceive it as wax through intellectual processes. Therefore, self is not defined by senses but rather by thinking, which is central to one's existence. According to Descartes, thinking refers to being conscious of one's self. Descartes attempted to define and understand the intellectual process to answer the fundamental questions. Descartes' view of self was radical because he believed that it can either be considered as a body or as a mind. Furthermore, he argued that one exists when thinking, which emphasizes the importance of cognitive functions in Descartes' view of self. The abilities to analyze, explore, experiment, and think are critical in his theory. In this regard, Descartes promoted learning through questioning everything and reevaluating the established beliefs. Seeking truth through thinking supports his idea of the mind being central to the essential self. Possible objections. The arguments presented by Descartes have been questioned by many people. One common objection to his ideas is the problem of mind and body dualism. Some can be skeptical about the possibility of the distinct existence of the mind and body. Furthermore, even if it is possible for the self to be either a thinking or a physical entity, what is the purpose of such a distinction? There is no evidence that the human being can exist as the thinking entity without its physical form. Rebuttal. Indeed, the mind and body are two integral parts of human existence, and there is not enough evidence for the possibility of the separate existence of the essential thinking self without its physical aspect. However, people might not yet have the ability to do so. At the same time, there are instances of the body existing and performing its functions without the real presence of the mind, such as unconscious or comatose states. Similarly, the thinking abilities of people with mental illnesses are affected, which does not necessarily impact their physical entity. In turn, their ability to differentiate between the real and surreal can be compromised. Such examples support Descartes' idea of the dualism of the mind and body, since if the body can be central to one's existence in certain cases, the opposite might be possible even if it is beyond people's understanding. Conclusion. To conclude, Descartes' idea that the essential self as thinking entity is central to one's consciousness unlike the self as material entity is correct and can be supported by arguments. In this regard, one's self involves two dimensions, the mind and the body. At the same time, the thinking entity is essential to the self because the intellectual process is central to one's existence, according to Descartes' principles. The concept of consciousness supports the idea that the mind is distinct from the body and, in most cases, superior. This and many other essays are available at studycorgi.com.